We know that every company wants to improve customer experience, and one of the key skills required in that endeavor is problem solving. In fact, effective problem solving skills enable individuals to identify, analyze, and resolve issues that affect clients, leading to improved customer satisfaction, loyalty, and retention. If you don't think problem solving is a key skill, according to the Future of Jobs survey by the World Economic Forum, complex problem solving has been identified as one of the top 15 skills that will be sought by employers, and around 36% of workplaces require complex problem solving skills as a core skill. While that is interesting, I'm curious as to how the intersection of historical principles, critical thinking, and effective communication shape problem solving within a company and influence revenue growth in the B2B tech industry in particular. I'll put that question to our guest in just a moment. But first, hello and welcome to the Predictable B2B Success Podcast brought to you by Sproutworth.com. I'm Vinay Koshi, and our guest today is Andrew Cole. Andrew, you've had quite a bit of experience in the customer service or customer success space. You're currently the CEO of Backbox, which transforms network and security automation with a customer-first approach. Prior to Backbox, you have led global customer-focused organizations and created strategies to drive truly meaningful customer relationships. In fact, you were VP of Customer Success at NetApp and the first Chief Customer Officer at SailPoint. You were also a co-founder of Credent Technologies, a leading security software firm that was acquired by Dell Technologies. So I'm curious, Andrew, was there a particular event or trigger that led to you being involved with Backbox?
Thanks for having me. And this is a topic that I really love. To your point, was there a specific moment that led me to this? Yeah, I think it's one of the most important elements of a company is customer retention. And the best way to retain a customer is to have good strategies around what is that long-term retention plan going to be. It's not just the dollars that you're looking for,
Mm.
it's the references, it's the usability, it's the input into your product features. And so that's something I've always loved. And so I've been fortunate to build a career that has focused on what I call the long tail of the relationship with a customer, and that's after the sale is made. And so I think I was fortunate to get into this role because of my focus on retention, my focus on taking care of customers. And as a small company, in order for us to grow, we need to make sure we take care of every single customer we get on board. So I'm guessing here, but that's probably how I got in this seat.
And was this a bit of an evolution from Credent, or was this a
It's
completely
a little
different
bit of an
venture
evolution
altogether?
because Backbox is private equity owned, and the private equity firm that owns Backbox, it's the
Mhm.
same people that funded me in the first startup that I did, Credent, 22 years ago. So it was myself and two other gentlemen started this company.
Wow.
Started Credent. We got venture funding from a gentleman who is currently our board chair, and we just have had a relationship for a long time. So he's seen my career, he's seen the results we've been able to put up, and we developed a friendship. So I think that's probably the connective tissue that helped me get where I am today.
Mhm. And given your journey to date, what would you say would be your
I
personal
think mine
area
is
of strength?
understanding customer needs. That's a broad answer and it's a broad topic, but customer needs in terms of what does the customer need today in order for them to be successful 18, 24, and 36 months out? Because the way you have to look, or the way I've always looked at a customer, is it's not a point in time relationship. It's long term. It's just like a friendship or a marriage or a partner relationship. You typically want those to be long term. And that's how I approach customer relationships. And that's probably the single most important way that I, from a broad sense, look at how I approach anything.
Mhm. In that area of strength, what would you say is something that businesses don't know
Yeah,
but should?
what there's probably two things, and I'm sorry that I can't give you one answer, but I think number one is probably understanding what the customer really wants. Now, again, going back to that phrase I used, a point in time solution, say a customer has a challenge with something, they probably want a solution to that challenge immediately so that they can continue using your product and services.
Mhm.
But you have to look beyond that. And you really have to understand, where's the customer trying to go strategically? Are they trying to go? Are they grow? Are they trying to take down new markets? Are they trying to expand their product suite? Are they trying to dislodge a competitor? And are they trying to do that? Is there a way that your product or service can benefit what they're trying to do? So I think a lot of companies tend to focus on the point in time solution. What can I do for you today without looking long term? And that long term
Mm.
has got to be aligning with what the customer's strategy for growth is, or what their strategic direction might be. And a lot of companies do it well, but I've seen way too many that are just focused on what's immediately in front of them.
What about the future? In my experience, it also helps to look at where they're
Well,
heading or wanting to head
yeah,
into
and
the
I love this
future.
part because one of
What's
the
your
things
take
that
on
we've
that?
successfully done at many of the companies I've been at is we've aligned with our customers either through the form of a user group or an advisory council of some sort to get the input so that
Mhm.
we can understand, okay, what is your long-term direction? Where are you trying to get, and how can we be a part of that? If we're an infrastructure software, how can we make sure that we're aligning to your growth plans, whether it's organic or inorganic? How can we make sure that our product is going to scale at the rate that you need it to scale? And so it's looking into the future. And the more you can align yourself to their long term direction, you don't want to become in the case of a software company, you don't want to be a bespoke development shop unless that's what you do. But the more you can align to their long term
Mhm.
direction, the more you can become what I call more sticky within the enterprise and more sticky within their planning
Right.
process. And it's easier said than done, but very early on, if you can align in the form of an advisory council or a user group and find out how are they using you, what are they replacing, why did they replace the prior technology, what are the problems they're trying to solve today. Those are the
Mhm.
kind of probing questions that I think are important to ask in order to understand the future element of where they need to be.
So alignment is key here. I'm curious, how do you see the intersection of historical principles, critical thinking, and effective communication in shaping not only problem solving within the company, but also influencing revenue growth, especially in
Yeah,
the
this is
B2B tech
probably a
space?
soapbox issue for me. One of my greatest frustrations, I think, right now is probably twofold. Is I think that a lot of there's been a loss of the ability in business for critical thinking. Unless you're coming out of a management consulting firm, an environment or a highly technical environment where critical
Mhm.
thinking is required, it feels to me, this is based on opinion, that we're lacking critical thinking and we quickly rush to judgment and we quickly rush to implement a potential solution or a fix that hasn't been fully thought through. In relation to that, the other piece that I find problematic or challenging is communicating. Number one, you communicate what is the resolution to the problem that you're trying to solve, or communicating an understanding of the problem that's trying to be solved or the challenge that's in front of you. The ability for critical thinking and the ability for clarity and brevity in communication, I believe, is a lost art. And again, it's a soapbox issue for me. But those two, to me, I believe that communication can
Mhm.
solve all problems if you are asking the right questions, which comes from critical thinking, which comes from critical analysis. And as you receive the information, how are you distilling that back in a way to clarify, okay, I understand your challenge. Now let me phrase it back to you in a way to make sure we're both on the same page. The critical thinking and communication skills go hand in hand. And again, too often I see people are quick to jump to a solution or quick to jump to an assumption on something without really understanding everything
Mm.
that is behind the root cause.
How do you help people overcome that? What I would sometimes what I would believe to be a bit of a
Yeah.
blind spot for most people. Is there a way to check oneself or to a framework that you would recommend from the
It's
people
funny
you
you said
use?
check oneself. I've heard a phrase many years ago that I still think is funny, but it makes sense. And it says, check yourself before you wreck yourself. And I think that's relevant to your question. Slow down. It's okay to slow down sometimes. And I think that's probably the number one thing that individuals, corporations, groups need to do is in order to problem solve effectively, let's slow down for a moment and make sure we clearly understand the problem. Let's analyze it and make sure that we're looking at it externally as well as internally, because there's always two sides to a problem or a challenge. So slow down, make sure that you're having that
Mm.
bi-directional conversation and looking at a challenge or from both sides, or maybe there's four sides you need to look at it from. But that's probably the most important thing. And I'm guilty of wanting to be the first to, just like a student in class, teacher asks a question, there's some students that want to be the first one with the answer, so they immediately raise their hand. But they're not often right because there's usually depth to a question that if you really slow down and listen and distill what's being asked, you can come up with the right answer or the right solution.
I'm also curious if your experience in building and selling a company, largely based on service levels, shaped your perspective on business fundamentals. You've talked about critical thinking and communication, but is it?
I was fortunate enough to have worked with some really talented people at Credent Technologies. We were just a level set, we were a data encryption software company. And we founded it in 2001, and for 12 years we ran that company, and then Dell Technologies acquired us. And I distinctly remember sitting at dinner with some of the executive members the night of the acquisition. It was the executive team from Credent and the executive team from Dell, and they said, "Hey, do you know why we acquired you guys?" We had been having dinner, and they said, "Why we acquired you?" And of course, we all raised our hand. Oh, great technology. And yes, but there's something else. And another answer was, we have great partnerships. And yes, but there's something else. And we all scratched our heads. And they said, we acquired you because of the way you take care of your customers. And we all looked at them funny for a moment, and we asked them to expand on that. And they'd said to us that when they did reference checks with our customers, they had never heard customers come back and speak so fondly and so complimentary and give such positive reviews about a vendor as they had with us. And I remember one of the senior executives at Dell said, if we can extract that DNA and how you approach customer success or customer service and implement that, we can do a lot of good together and be very successful. And so for us, that was incredibly complimentary because, look, a lot of things went into building that company to make it successful. Great product, good engineering team, great sales team, good leadership, good partnership with Dell. But ultimately, for them to say how you take care of your customers and those references that came back spoke volumes to the importance of customer success. And customer success was not a term back then when we were acquired, but it is today. But it's really just making sure that you reduce your churn. And so I've been doing that for 22
Mm.
years. And so for me, it's just innate and it's important and it's built into my operating DNA. And it's just something that I think when you think about critical communication skills, you think about critical thinking, all of these things tie together. And I've been fortunate to see the positive results of how that works out.
That's interesting because listening to you, I would get the impression that customer success, as we call it today, or customer service, is really process driven. Would that be a
It
fair
is,
comment?
but you can't let process take over the human components. Process is an important framework,
Mhm.
but I would say I don't mean to stop short on the question, but I would say don't err too much on the side of process and leave the human element, because the human element has to follow the process guidelines, but at some sort you have to call an audible, or as Peyton Manning would say, call an Omaha, and change things. So there's those two go hand in hand very importantly.
But what would you say to people who would say that our people are the strategic differentiator in service level?
This is probably an unpopular opinion, but people are not a strategic differentiator for a company, because you can find good people in a lot of places. And if you insert good people into the framework and the processes that you have in place, you can continue to carry on. I don't mean to say that
Mhm.
good people are not important. You have to have good people. But if somebody says to me, if I say, what's your strategic
Mm.
differentiator as a company? And they say people, I'm going to question whether or not they've really thought through their go to market strategy, their product differentiation, understanding their competitive set. And this is something an old professor of mine from business school used to say, and that people are important, but they're not a strategic differentiator. And it took me a long time to really understand that, because at first I was insulted because I thought, I've got a good team of
Mm.
people and they're important. It has nothing to do with the importance of the people. It has everything to do with what are the things that you have within your organization that are unorthodox, that are truly differentiated from what the market is doing. Those are the strategic differentiators, not necessarily people.
Mhm. So, how would you recommend we find balance between building a good team as well as being
I think
process
when
oriented?
you build a good team, and I don't want to sound cliche on these answers, but I think when you build a good team, you have to think about, okay, the people that I'm bringing on board and the people that are being trained and the people that are currently here, we have to make sure that we're thinking of the customer first. And by that, what are the ways that we're going to make it easy to work with us? If you think with a customer mindset first,
Mm.
how are we going to make it easy for the customer to work with us? That should define the processes that you put in place. Complexity does not necessarily mean better, and ease of process does not necessarily mean it has to be one step. But the engagement process, how you work with them on the initial engagement, the middle engagement, the long term engagement, it can't be full of complexity. And again, too often I've seen way too much complexity put into a process that it either goes off track, is difficult to implement, is not endorsed or supported by the organization or by customers. So find good people, understand what the needs of the customer are, and then say, as we define the process together, let's make sure that it's a process that is simple and easy to follow and that it's going to benefit the customer.
But I would imagine that moving from an organization that perhaps is either people centric or process centric to one that is customer centric can be a bit of a challenge that requires both a mind shift and a heart shift. Now, I'm curious, is there an example that you could share of such a situation where you've actually successfully led a team or organization through
Yeah.
this transition? And if,
Without naming the customer name, just for the sake of their privacy, we had a situation
sure.
where it was a major bank and it was in a different part of the world. And the bank was having some challenges with our software. And the software was literally causing transactions to halt, banking transactions to halt, whether it's trading or getting access to money. That's a bad thing. And going through the challenge, there were members of the team that thought a couple minutes or a couple hours isn't going to impact anything as long as we get things working. And so we finally got, after a while, the customer just wasn't happy. And so we finally sat down and said, help us understand the impact. And the minute we said, help us understand the impact, the customer then started saying to us, these funds don't get transferred, people lose their jobs. These funds don't get transferred, small businesses aren't able to make payroll. These funds don't get transferred, people that are looking for cash aren't able to access cash and they might need to pay somebody. The minute they said that, it really resonated with the team that, wow, now this is impacting the customer. And so I talked a little while ago about customer first mindset and thinking about the customer. The minute we understood what those impacts were, it amplified our resolution rate and it got the team thinking more creatively. Okay, how can we get this resolved faster? Or how can we break down this problem as opposed to one big problem? Let's look at it from the standpoint of micro problems. Solve a little one, solve a little one, solve a little one, and the little ones make up resolution for the big problem. And we finally overcame it, and we went from potentially losing that large global banking customer to retaining them. And they ultimately came back after a few ugly conversations. They ultimately came back and said, thank you for understanding how the impact was hurting us. And we built a long, successful partnership. And that was a painful example because when somebody says jobs are on the line or commerce stops, that's highly problematic. And you don't want to be responsible for that.
Yep. Brilliant. I remember from a previous conversation, you mentioned the importance of having a
Mhm.
framework for problem solving. Could you outline for us the key components of this framework and how it applies
Yeah,
to your
no,
work at
I
back
thanks for
office?
asking that question. I think first of all is once you hear that there's a problem or a challenge, start to analyze it. Again, look at it from your perspective, look at it from the
Mhm.
customer's perspective, look at it from a competitor's standpoint, look at it from a partner's standpoint. There's multiple ways to start analyzing it, but make sure that as you analyze it, collect data from all those elements and then look for commonalities. So I'd say with the analysis process, look for commonalities in the data or patterns to make sure you thoroughly understand the problem. The next piece is start to put a plan in place that's going to allow you to take down how those problems rank. And it could be a two-step plan, it could be a three-step plan, but as you start to put the plan in place, make sure you understand what resources are going to be needed to resolve the problem. You might need more QA resources. You might need more sales architect resources. You might need more implementation resources. You might need more hardware resources. Just make sure you create that list as you go through the planning process. Once you've done that analysis and the planning, the third step would be begin to implement. But I would say implement in small stages. A phrase that I've used before, I call them micro strategies. Maybe it's micro implementation. Start to iterate as you go. And I think this falls in line with the agile development process. Build as you go. Don't wait to implement something and say, okay, it's going to be done in 9 weeks. See what kind of success you can get over a 3 day period or a 1 week period, and have little successes as you go. And then the last piece is of the steps, if you were to say there's a 4 step process, is evaluate. Make sure that as you're analyzing, as you're planning, as you're implementing, you're evaluating as you go. Am I getting the data that I need? Am I understanding the problem? Am I planning properly? Do I have the right implementation plan? So that evaluation part is really the umbrella that sits over the other three. And that's a process or a
Mhm.
framework rather that I've used over the years after a lot of failures that I've put in place that I find works very well,
Mhm.
especially with a smaller company like we are. Large enterprise organizations have the luxury of maybe a little bit more time and resources. We have to be very nimble, very quick, react quickly. And those 4 steps are things that we typically do when we're addressing an issue.
Makes a lot of sense. Backbox, as I understand it, focuses on bringing clarity to chaos in network environments. How does this mission resonate with your broader philosophy on problem solving
Uh,
and business
yeah,
transformation?
and that phrase you use is one that I remember us talking about when we first met, and I like it. We again, network automation, networks are a critical part of any operation. Yeah, again, people talk about how data is the lifeblood of a company, and that's true. But if that lifeblood can't flow through the network, if the network goes down, then you've got a big problem. And so I think what we do is pretty
Mm.
important for us as dealing in the realm of network automation and automating the network security devices, routers, switches, firewalls. We have to be able to move very quickly. So that 3 step, analyze, plan,
Mm.
implement, and then evaluate as you go, we have to do that very quickly because, again, if a network goes down, commerce stops. If a device is not authorized to be on a network, it's highly problematic and you run the risk of an infiltration within your environment. If there's a vulnerability on a device, on a router or switch or firewall, those usually have to be patched very quickly. And so
Mhm.
for us, speed is the ultimate driver in everything that we do. And so that framework that I referenced is one that we try and implement that we found has allowed us to move very quickly.
Yep. I would imagine, as and you've alluded to this earlier on, that communication is key in this whole piece. Given where we are today with AI chatbots, etc., how do you balance the need for automation with critical thinking, especially in the context of being able to communicate and
Yeah,
understand
in the realm of
issues?
AI, this is all new thinking for a lot of companies. I think there are things that you can do. A lot of AI is pattern based thinking, which a lot of aligns very nicely with the automation world. There are things within
Mhm.
the support realm, for example, you can leverage a chat bot for problem resolution on some very mundane or benign challenges and issues. But I think as you start to move up the scale to get when you have more significant problems or challenges, I think AI is an area where we need to think through very thoroughly before implementing AI as the end all be all piece of software. I worry that, as they say, the machines will take over. Chatbots are great, I think, but again, helping with benign or less severe issues. I think when you're dealing with enterprise complexity, enterprise software, there has to be an element of human interaction to really understand what's happening. Because at some point, I suspect AI will be able to fully address the most complex software issue that there is, but I've not seen that yet. And so when customers ask us, "Or what are we doing from an AI standpoint?" It's something that we're looking very carefully and very closely at. But given what we do within their IT infrastructure, I think we're still way too early to consider implementing AI as a way to either roll out the software or address issues. Doesn't mean we won't do it, but I think I want to make sure that I fully and thoroughly understand how to leverage AI that will truly benefit our customers to a point where we know we have great confidence in the solution we're putting forward.
I've heard of instances where companies are building their own large language models based on interactions, etc., past data, in order to assist some of the
Mhm.
customer facing roles that exist within an organization. Is that something you're looking at
It,
or
it is no,
potentially
and
involved?
that's a fun question. One of the things that is beneficial, we've got over 500 global customers, and so there's a lot of data that we've got access to understand what issues are, where the commonalities of some of the challenges they've had. Yeah, we do have a large source of data that we can access, and we're looking at how to best use that so that our customers can benefit from it when or if they should have any challenges.
That certainly seems to be something that's at the forefront. And do you see that as potentially evolving into, I guess, some of the other applications that we talked about, where there would be increased automation and less of a human requiring to
I
interact
think so.
with
I
some of the
used the
issues?
phrase a little while ago, bringing clarity to chaos. And I think as networks become more complex, as networks
Mhm.
grow, as more devices get onto those networks, there is going to be more complexity. So leveraging those large language models and building the right AI component into that over time is going to be incredibly important. So we're definitely seeing it. We've had customers ask about it, but there's definitely room for that from our perspective.
I am thinking back to that story you shared of the issues you dealt with at that global bank. I'm curious, how do you see the role of customer stories in influencing
Mhm.
revenue growth for a company
I think
like
it's
Backbox?
validation. The best way, stories are great. We all love stories. Storytelling has become very popular over the years. There's use cases, there's user groups, there's a variety of ways to do it. But I think when an enterprise is looking to invest money, they want to make sure that the two things, they're making the right investment and that they can trust you. If you can tell the right
Mhm.
story or get your customer, better yet, get your customers to tell your story for you, that's the kind of validation that a potential prospect wants to see. They can say, and these are just random examples, if BMW is considering purchasing your software and they say Ford Motor Company did it, and we saw that Ford Motor Company as a result had growth of X, we believe or have better belief that this product could benefit us as well because they know the automotive industry, they help solve their problem. So that storytelling is critically important, which really goes back to the genesis of customer success. Make sure that you're aligning with your customers, you really understand their needs, because somebody's not going to tell your story for you unless there's a relationship, unless there's an
Mm.
element of trust, and unless they've had positive experience with you.
And that is so critical. I
Yeah.
couldn't agree with you more than that one. With this idea of building trust, given how do you believe customer stories contribute to building trust with potential clients, and what impact, if you're aware of this, what impact does it have on this on the
I think the
process?
first thing that comes to mind is consistency. Trust comes from not just one result or two results, positive results, but a trajectory or a history of positive
Mhm.
results or positive outcomes rather. And that aligns with consistency. Is there clarity in what a company is able to do for a customer? And then is there a consistent pattern that shows that they've done it multiple times and they know what they're doing? If you have that clarity and then you can start to
Mhm.
see that consistency, then that element of trust comes into play. And I think once you have clarity, consistency, and you've earned their trust, a prospect's trust, then there's the opportunity for the investment to be made and or a prospect to become a customer. But again, it's not something that immediately happens. And so that's why the storytelling is so important. That's why building the right customer retention model is so important. Again, the retention, that's the long tail of the relationship. And if I could say one thing, I'd say build a great product, market it the right way, sell it in an honest and way with integrity, but then make sure that long tail of the relationship is one that you are putting your best efforts towards. And it's one that is going to have a continuous cycle of clarity, of trust. If you don't have that, it's going to be a very difficult and lumpy growth model for you.
Very critical components there. Obviously, with your customers and moving them through retention and
Mhm.
perhaps even advocacy, you want to ensure that they are able to retell the story in a way that highlights the value proposition that they have attained. Is there a bit of coaching or a conversation that you have with your clients around that, and also within your
Yeah, I think
organization as
it's so. This is a fun question too. I think the coaching that I would give the customers, and I actually have had this conversation with a few customers because I've had customers call and say, "Hey, Andrew, we had XYZ company call us to do a reference and they wanted to know our experience." What I would say is emphasize the why. And I think there's a business book, it might be Simon Sinek, Start with the Why. What I mean by that is have your customer tell the story of why they decided to make the decision to use your product or service. If they can clearly articulate what that is, then I think you're going to be on the right track. And there's usually a lot of elements on the why. It comes down to product features, price, the people that they interacted with, did it solve their problem? So there's not one answer to the why, but always lead with here's why we went with this company. And I know for a fact that it's worked because I have had conversations with customers where they've come back and they've said, "Hey Andrew, we spoke to this company that's considering you guys, and we started out and we told them exactly why we chose Backbox and exactly why we continue to stay with Backbox." And so starting with that why, coach your customers around that, and then just say, hey, what are the two or three most
Mhm.
important elements that go into your why?
Is there perhaps an element or two around this ability to uncover a customer's why and storytelling that you find doesn't get talked
I
about?
don't know if there's, I don't have know if I have a clear answer for that, but I know a lot of it is just probing, ongoing asking, ongoing series of questions to make sure that you, or in my case, I've sat down with customers and I know that I've had to rephrase, okay, this is what you said. Am I hearing you correctly? No, that's not what I'm saying. They'd say it again, and I'd
Mhm.
continue to have to go back. And so a lot of it is just probing. Again, I don't know if that's the right approach, but it's the approach that's worked for me. And so that probing allows them to make sure that they're either phrasing the answer in the right way, or B, allows you to say, hey, maybe I'm not asking the question in the right way. And at some point, if you probe enough, you're either going to make somebody really annoyed with you, or you're going to get the answer that you're looking for, and they're going to provide the clarity to what you were looking for. One of the two will
Mhm.
happen.
I'm also curious, you have a focus
Mhm.
on customer retention. How do you measure its impact?
Right.
Obviously, lifetime value is a key indicator, but are there leading indicators that you look towards in order to ensure that whatever you're doing is heading down the right track as opposed to
Yeah,
a
we
indicator?
track everything from net retention and gross retention and CSAT and net promoter scores. Those are all core in our metrics DNA. But the things that I look for that might be leading indicators are their level of engagement with us, out or inbound engagement from the customer to us. Are they calling us, asking us questions? Not saying, hey, I have a problem, but it's, hey, can you do this? Can you
Mhm.
do this? Or I'm thinking about things in this way. That's probably the number one indicator that I can see that we've got the right engagement model with somebody is the unsolicited inbound communication that
Mhm.
comes from them that has them clearly thinking about, can we expand our footprints, or we're going to need to consider making a feature request. Those are the things that I look for time and time again, and we're fortunate that we have a very communicative customer base, and they're usually not afraid to engage with us and ask questions, whether it's with the support team or somebody on our account management team or one of our sales reps. That inbound engagement from customers that we get is probably the number one indicator that I look at that says, hey, we're doing the right thing with regards to ensuring we have a solid retention model.
And is there a key set of experiences that you find tends to move clients to that level of engagement
I think
than
it's
others?
the first thing would be get them up and running quickly. One of the benefits of Backbox that I
Mhm.
really enjoy is you're able to get your enterprise up and running on our Backbox product within a matter of weeks, if not days. Unlike a lot of traditional enterprise
Right.
softwares where it's multiple months of service level engagements. And so the faster
Mhm.
that you can get them up and running or get that time to value, I think starts to build the credibility very quickly. And that's probably the number one element, specifically answer your
Mm.
question.
And when I'm curious, do you measure the impact of customers on
That's
revenue at
we've
all?
not, and we probably should. If I were to go back, we track where when a prospect comes in and within our CRM, we'll track. Hey, did it come from a partner? Was it a
Mhm.
referral? Did it come from XYZ customer? We do track that, but I've actually never looked at the data to say how many of our current customers are referring new business. So I just have publicly said,
Mm.
given myself some homework to do. So I need to go check that out.
With maintaining and building an effective feedback loop with customers, how do you do it, and how does this loop influence, if at all, the creation of compelling
Well,
customer
I mean,
stories?
first of all, the more I'm a big advocate of people doing your PR for you, for lack of a better term. So the more customers
Mhm.
we have that can publicly speak about, hey, Backbox solved this problem for us, and or we've improved our operations as a result of backbox automation software. I absolutely want to do that. And so that's a big focus for us, which is part of the reason why we've got our advisory boards and our user groups that we've created. And a big reason why we've got such a focus on taking care of our customers, because they can be the loudest and most impactful PR agency for you. We can put out press releases all day, but if somebody else is singing your praises, that right there is magic.
Certainly. And do you ensure the customer stories are effectively communicated across various platforms
We do. We
and
try and
or
do
touch
everything
points?
from video stories to written case studies to use cases on our website and promoted through LinkedIn. And so there's probably a number of more channels that we can do. We do a lot of speaking engagements. We were recently at the first network automation conference in Denver, Colorado called AutoCon, where we were able to have some real life examples and conversations around some customer success stories. So we do what we can. There's a lot more that we can do, but absolutely, that's a big part of our outbound strategy.
Brilliant. I know we've covered a fair bit of ground around this whole area of problem solving and customer success or customer service, but yeah, are there a couple of areas that you find doesn't get much airtime in this space? And if
Uh,
so, what would they be?
with regards to communication or customer success, or
Yeah,
yeah,
customer
I
success
think the
and
first
problems.
is I think the customers, it's great to see the customer success industry taking off the way it has. There's a number of companies that build software just around it. There's been a lot of very vocal and very influential leaders in this space that have influenced my thinking. But I think the thing that I'm going to say most is do not let metrics and process get in the way of the human engagement that has to happen with customer relations. Nothing can replace sitting down face to face, or I guess these days on a Zoom call, and looking somebody in the eye and really watching the body language, understand their needs, know that there's not two or three other things happening in the background, and get their attention to understand what's important to you, or how can I make you more successful, Mrs. or Mr. Customer. And I see too many companies get solely focused on the metrics that they lose sight of the human engagement level, whether that's internally or externally. That I just hope we're not headed down a path towards disengagement. Old fashioned, I like to go to a store
Mm,
when I want to check out and interact with somebody. I think self service portals are great, they're ease, but they should not take over the human interaction, because sometimes you need to speak to a real person to
yeah,
resolve a problem.
absolutely. Um, is there perhaps? Sorry, I'll ask you this question first. Who has influenced you the most in terms of your perspective around?
Wow, there's a lot of different business leaders out there. So I'll give you two names. One name is a gentleman that I worked with and for indirectly when I was at NetApp. His name's Tom Mendoza. He was the vice chairman of NetApp for many years. The way he treated people and engaged with people, whether it's customers or employees. Yeah, I always have felt that I'm very approachable and I always put people first. But watching Tom really elevated my game in terms of really understanding how to care for folks and engage with them. And so he's influenced my thinking. The other one, quite candidly, would probably be my grandfather, one of my grandfathers. He was very old school, very traditional about the handshake, looking somebody in the eye, and building a relationship before you tried to earn their business and building their trust. I was born and raised in the Midwest. My family's from the Midwest. And so my grandfather was a child of the Depression, and he worked very hard through difficult times to get where he was. But I always watched how he treated people and how he interacted with people. And that always made an impression on me that it's not, you don't do it just to get
Mm,
something, you do it to treat people the right way. And when people feel valued, they're more inclined to want to either spend time with you, spend money with you, trust you, and engage with you more.
that having someone like that in your life can
Yep.
be incredibly formative. But I'm curious, with Tom, was there a particular event or incident that kind of sticks in your mind? How
So
it
when I
shaped
was at
your thinking?
NetApp was going through they had some very difficult product challenges, and as a result, there was quite a bit of customer churn. This was many years ago. And the company was reeling from those product challenges and trying to find what the resolution was going to be. As a result, the company had to go through a large transformation, which, as we all know, is a euphemism for cost reductions and reorganization. What really influenced me was watching Tom talk about, interact with people, and then talk about how we treat people through this process. It was high stress. We knew changes were going to be coming to people on the team. Customers were unhappy. And so watching him help guide and coach and mentor us on how we engage with unhappy customers, how we take care of our teammates that may not have a seat at the table anymore because of the changes that the company had to make, that was incredibly influential on me. And that was probably one of the most high stress moments of my career. But we worked through it. We had the right plan that we put in place. But it's the approach that the leadership team, from the CEO to my boss to all the other teammates that we worked with, it's the approach that we all put in place and really understood. Let's do this with integrity. Let's make sure that the customers know we truly care. Let's make sure that we know that our teammates that are being impacted, that we truly care. Let's provide the support. And it made it a lot easier, if I could use that term, to get through that challenge. And so that's probably the most formative thing that I recall from my time with Tom.
Brilliant. Andrew, this has been fascinating. Lots of insights here. Is there a question I should have asked but haven't covered as yet?
Oh boy, I'm not. Look, I don't know that I have the right question for you to ask me. I will.
Sure.
Yeah, I will
Or a
say that
topic.
success for 22 years before the term came into vogue, and it's rooted in old-fashioned strategies of making sure you understand the customer's problem or the customer's challenge first before you start telling them you have an answer. That aligns to critical thinking and communication and patience. And I cannot emphasize enough that as companies start to grow at any scale, you have got to make sure that you are approaching this with a human centric, customer centric mindset first. And for anybody listening in the customer success space, don't let the metrics get you caught up. Metrics are important, they're good indicators, leading and lagging, but don't get away from the human centric aspect of what customer success really means.
And if listeners are curious, want to find out more or connect with you,
It'd be
where would
great.
they head
LinkedIn
to?
is the best way. I'm easy to find. Andrew Call is the name. Backbox is the company, which both on LinkedIn, or just backbox.com is the best way to find us. So we'd love to help you learn more about what we do, and I'd love to connect with anybody.
Brilliant. We'll include links to those in the show notes. Andrew, thank you so
Enjoyed
much.
it, Vinay. Thanks
This has
for your
been
time and thanks
terrific.
for the probing questions. It was fun.